Remember, I told you, it's not no angle. It's a real roundish thing. So, who are you?
Today I want to sit down and ask you, who are you? It seems like economically and politically we have the whole world built on one region, one religion that has branched off into so many orders of Catholic, Muslim, Protestant, Mormon, Christian, Pentecostal, Judaism. Who are you?
Is called race. And I can't think of a subject where the expression "the ignored truths of history" is more apt than this one. When we talk about race, we're talking about that group of people that white people sometimes call niggers. I wonder how many of you actually know what that word means. You will by the end of this show. Now, if I were to tell you that blacks once had a great culture which exceeded the culture of whites, you'd probably find that pretty incredible. But we're talking about the ignored truths of history. Those of you who've been watching this show may perhaps recall that several weeks ago, we talked about the fact that most of the Jews alive in the world today may actually be descendants of Russian converts. Now, Jews like to consider themselves to be descendants of Israel. So the fact that Russia was once a Jewish nation for 500 years, in fact, and that most Jews who are alive today may be more closely descended from Attila the Hun than from King Solomon. These are facts which are just glaring facts, and it's incredible that such things could be ignored. And the question of how such things could be ignored has an answer, and the answer is collusion. All the parties involved have silently agreed, even perhaps without ever talking to each other, they've silently agreed to just not discuss this subject. In the case of the Russian Khazar Jews, it's embarrassing and frightening to Jews to consider the possibility that they may actually be descendants of converts and may have very little...
They believe that Israel and the Jews are the same people, and that has never been true. That is, in fact, one of the biggest lies of history, namely the Jewish claim that they are the Israel of the Bible. For example, Revelation 2:9 says that there is a people who say they are Jews are not and do lie, but are the synagogue of Satan. And so we have to understand that there's great deception, monumental deception that has been taking place, and we can say very specifically in the last 2,125 years, they believe that Israel and the Jews are the same people, and that has never been true. That is, in fact, one of the biggest lies of history, namely the Jewish claim that they are the Israel of the Bible. For example, Revelation 2:9 says that there is a people who say they are Jews are not and do lie, but are the synagogue of Satan. And so we have to understand that there's great deception, monumental deception that has been taking place, and we can say very specifically in the last 2,125 years that a group of people who are not Israelites, in fact, are Edomites. And Canaanites. Who have been masquerading, who have been pretending to be Israel for the last 2 millennia. But I can say categorically that not a single word of the Bible was written by a Jew. And that's because the Jews aren't Israelites and never were Israelites. In fact, the Sephardic Jews, as we're going to find out today, were actually members of the Canaanite Edomite tribe of Idumea and related peoples who were always at war with Israel. And that there are two distinct groups of people blended into one people, namely the Ashkenazi Jews and the Sephardic Jews. The Ashkenazi Jews, who are up to 95% of the Jewish population in the world today. The Ashkenazis are European Jews. The fact is, most Ashkenazim are descended from 3 genomes. So we have the Japhethites, the Mongols, and the Hittites, also known as Turks. Those 3 genomes make up the Ashkenazi people, and there's no Shemitic blood in those people whatsoever. And the Sephardic Jews are Spanish Jews. So those Spanish Jews were actually the Sephardic Jews who came from the Middle East, who were actually the survivors of the Roman army's destruction of Jerusalem and the army under Titus. They came from the Middle East, they came from Palestine. Many of whom wandered across northern Africa and actually were in cahoots with the Moors against the Christians of Spain, and were instigating the Moors to attack Christian Spain.
And then when you come to the group that we call the white Jewish community, we want to make it clear to that black Hebrew Israelite brothers and sisters who are not the same as the white Jewish community. We want to make that clear to our people to understand. Because sometimes they may call our brothers and sisters black Jews, but that's not an appropriate title for them. They're Hebrew Israelites.
Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said,
"Why is this happening to me?"
So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her,
2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated.
There were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out, with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob.
What had happened was that there was a certain segment of the population in northern Africa which started becoming very warlike. What you now know as Caucasian. They became so warlike, it's such a big problem, that the rest of the Moorish people got together and was like, what the hell are we going to do with these guys? You know, they just won't stop. They're going to overtake everything and destroy us. So they decided to banish them. Europe is named after the African queen Europa. Europe was a dead wasteland, and it was used as a transcontinental prison to dump all the assholes who were causing the problem, namely the paleskins. So they had to get out of there anyway for health reasons. There were several reasons. 1, they were no longer part of the family of men. 2, they were pale-skinned, they couldn't stay in the sun anymore. 3, they were destroying the environment, polluting it, experimenting on themselves in abominable ways. So they decided to banish them. In referencing the mountain ranges, there was one particular mountain range, you got the Sierra Nevada, the Caucasus. One particular mountain range called the Caucasus that a lot of them hung around. So this is how the term Caucasian becomes associated with the pale skin. They were casted out. They were embarrassed. They were so embarrassed about what had happened, they went into this massive psychological denial about the whole thing and started inventing all sorts of other bullshit mythology. Monkeys coming down from the tree. Because they couldn't admit that they had been banished from the family of man, and this is the great sin they committed against themselves. That's why they were banished. Well, much the same way as the CIA does it to every country, the Greys go to the casted out paleskins and they say, you want to get back on top of the food chain, you want to get even. Because of course they didn't learn their lesson, and the Greys knew that by approaching them early on, they would be able to capitalize on that feeling of vendetta and viciousness. So they say to them, we'll put you on the top of everything. If you obey us from this day forward, we will give you all the technology you need to go out there and do one thing for us. Colonize the living hell out of everyone and destroy the family of man. Destroy them, destroy them, destroy them. So from that day forward, those original European paleskins sold out the rest of the human race by agreeing to it, and by agreeing to it in feudal law, that means all of their pale-skinned descendants were now obedient to that system. Delaware, Europe shows up on the scene as a world superpower, going out, destroying, colonizing, and massacring everyone in their path. Okay? Doing it to Africa, doing it to the Middle East, doing it to the Western Hemisphere and the Americas. This was their agenda, their motive, their Masonic operation.
Who am I?
They were known as the original Freemasons. By gaining the allegiance of the casted out paleskins, they then handed off that mantle to the paleskins. That's where Freemasonry came from, and it was created solely for the purpose of burying the Marty legacy.
All these entities are controlled by Jews, by Edomite and Khazar Jews.
Who am I?
This is Mystery Babylon. Mystery Babylon, the world empire of merchants, prophesied in the book of Revelation. All these entities, the United Nations, New World Order. So this is history's greatest Kanye, that the Jews have been impersonating Israel for these last 2,000 years. Because we're defining Jew as one who pretends to be a Judahite or an Israelite, that is, an Edomite who pretends to be an Israelite. That's what a Jew really is. But since the Sephardic Jews of that time were Edomites and Canaanites jealous of true Israel, they conspired to kill Jesus because they knew that his blood sacrifice would not apply to them.
Who am I?
Another area in Africa you have something big happening is in Nigeria. You have the Igbo people, or Igbo, pronounced either way. There's 40 million of them. Also Christians, like I spoke about before, how that could happen to the children of Israel very easily. But also a lot of them are now coming out and converting back or adopting the rules of the Torah without all the paganism that they've been practicing for hundreds of years. There's been books written about it from scholars in Nigeria, from scholars from the Jewish people. And where it gets interesting is, in America, there was a slave trade. And a lot of the slaves, a very high percentage of them, came from Western Nigerian ports. And in America today, you see a very large movement of African Americans who say that they're the real chosen people, that they're the children of Israel, they're the Judeans. You know, so what, are they just trying to create an identity for themselves because they were slaves, or is there really something here? And the answer is, most likely there is something there. And most likely, maybe that they were the original Israelites, and maybe that the Jewish people today, who are white, Caucasian people, came in a little bit later on. We know that some of the greatest sages of the transmission of the Torah were converts from Rome. You have a man named Onkelos, who wrote a commentary on the Torah, unprecedented, that we still learn today. He was a convert. Some of the largest pillars on the transmission today were Roman converts. So here we are, we're Caucasian Jewish people, and now you have people in Africa saying that they're the real people of Israel. It can't be ruled out at all. We know they were sold into slavery. We know now that they're fulfilling prophecies by saying, we're coming back.
Scripture's saying you have to carry the characteristics and the imprint of the one true God, Yahweh, the Most High. In and through Yeshua the Messiah must we pray to the Father. What parts you don't understand? See, at the end of the day, it's about your performance on earth and your characteristics and the laws that you have followed. Because how can you get grace or get kindness if you haven't followed the law that led to this grace and kindness?